Hello and welcome to Stories That Shape Us. My name is Joanna Daniel. Today I want to talk about a really important subject. It's something that I haven't tackled here before, and I think I might do a series on it. I have thought about doing something on this many times, but haven't done it. And I believe that now is the time because I've just finished a series on abuse, and this kind of follows on from it. And maybe I'll sandwich it with something else, but toxic shame. How do we heal from toxic shame? So first, I'm going to talk about what toxic shame is, and then I'm going to talk about some of the things that we can do to heal. Now, everybody, we all experience shame at different stages and ages in our lives, and one of the things I do at all my retreats is to do a session on shame, healing shame, understanding shame, and healing. I do one on that. And I get everybody to think about their shame story. And we all have more than one shame stories because we're alive and because things happen. But especially for people who experience childhood trauma, would understand that. So toxic shame is a feeling of worthlessness, but it's not just a feeling of worthlessness that you can shrug off and you can move on from, or just to step away from it. Today we have it, tomorrow we don't. Without healing, that is. Toxic shame goes really deeper than that, because if we think about, for a child, and sometimes this starts early in life, where we are told things by our caregivers, when you are called names by your caregivers. And for those who have experienced childhood trauma, especially when it's emotional abuse or neglect, emotional neglect, attachment injuries, those can, sexual trauma, all of it, it can send real, it can tells us real stories about ourselves that can influence shame at a deep level. When you grow up in poverty, and we know that, according to adverse childhood experience research, a child that wears dirty clothes, go to bed without food, not have enough, those things really are as traumatic as any other trauma. And so when you're growing up without, and when you're not having, it tells you things about yourself that it affects you at sometimes a cellular level. So it's really important to understand, what are the things in my life that was deeply shaming to me, and where in my body do I still carry the shame. Sometimes it's not just in our minds that we think we're ashamed, it's also in our physiology. Okay, so toxic shame sometimes occur in family systems, and this would be dysfunctional family systems that toxic shame will happen in. Sometimes, and I hear this all the time, when sometimes I post things and people say, oh, I've forgiven my mother, or I've forgiven my father, or I've forgiven the people who hurt me. And that's wonderful. But forgiveness won't heal toxic shame. It really needs to be understood and tackled to be able to heal, right? So they might call you names, they might verbally abuse you, physically abuse you, emotionally abuse you. You grew up in a home where there was abuse. You grew up in a home where there was mental health or parental separation or divorce. You grew up in a home where there was a lot of verbal abuse given to you through name calling, and a ripping apart sometimes of your very soul, because sometimes toxic shame can affect our soul, you know. And though you may have forgiven, that toxic shame needs to be addressed, needs to be understood. Where is it for me? Where does it sit? Is it in my heart? Is it in my stomach, in my chest, in my back? Where is it? And how is it impacting me today? So this sometimes, as I say, starts in dysfunctional family systems that leaves a deep root of unworthiness. Toxic shame will leave a deep root of unworthiness, this deep sense that you're not worthy. Sometimes you might have really good positions at work, but you feel like any day now, somebody's going to find out that I shouldn't do the job I'm doing and they're going to fire me. Or you might be running a very successful business and you think any minute now is going to crash. When is it going to happen as all of this is going to be taken away from me? You might be happily married, or just whatever you're doing in your life, it will tell you that this is going to go away any minute now, because you're so used to those words that were used against you, that you've integrated it into your own belief system, and it forms a part of your beliefs and your values. So that's how deeply embedded the shame is. And it influences toxic shame influence a feeling of low self-esteem, low self-worth that is transformed into a belief system. So the limiting beliefs is not just something I believe and a cognitive distortion that I need to work my way through. It's the way I think about myself. So it affects your dress, your decision making, your friendships, whether or not you have any. T- More often than not, people with toxic shame at this level don't have not experienced close, connected, fulfilling relationships. And so what we need to address is the root. And I always say, let's find the defining story. Let's find the defining story that is influencing this, and let's work at processing that defining story so that we can redefine the story. The story won't change, the things have happened, but we can find the defining story and redefine, okay, reframe rather. We can reframe how we feel, and we can start to begin the work of changing how you see yourself and to change in your belief system. Now, this is not overnight work, meaning it's not a quick fix. Healing at this level, it's not a quick fix, but it's beautiful work. If you are determined, you can do this work and enjoy freedom, real freedom. But the work has to be done. The defining story has to be found and processed. No, there's no way around it. We have to find the defining story because you will be making decisions that you don't know why you're making them. You'll be doing things, you'll be raising your children, you'll be running your business, running your life in ways that you don't know and understand because you're living with this deep sense of unworthiness. Um, Shame becomes, as I said, a value system that you tell yourself that you're bad, you're not good enough, and it influences limiting beliefs throughout your life. So think about what are the limiting beliefs that I have? What's the root of those limiting beliefs? Is it connected to toxic shame? Is it connected to a deep sense of unworthiness because of the things I've been told about myself that is so negative, that is ingrained in me, that is deeply embedded in me, in my nervous system, in my psyche? It's deeply embedded. And what do I need to do to tackle it? Who can help me to find that defining story and do the work of reframe? Shame, as I said earlier, affects our soul. It really is soul crushing. And that's why the work of releasing your soul from being crushed in that way is so necessary and important because it becomes a belief that affects it takes up space. It affects your soul and it takes up space. I believe, I believe, and this is my belief, it takes up space that God should occupy in your life. And so you may have an intellectual knowledge of him. You may believe him, love him, all of that. But shame still has this root and it still has precedence in your life. And you know what, friends? We get to release shame. We release it in all of its forms. And it doesn't hold us captive anymore. It's beautiful work. It's hard work, because healing is, but it's beautiful work. And you are worth that journey of becoming free from toxic shame. For people who have toxic shame, they will toxic shame will tell you that you're not enough. And though you might know the words that to counter that, as I said, because it's so deeply embedded, you believe that it's true. um, we need to, when we're healing, we need to learn how to integrate words that are true into every fiber of our being. So not just we're rewiring our brain, definitely, but we'll have to also rewire our nervous system when we are healing from toxic shame. So it's not just the mind work, it's the body work as well that is necessary. That's why at all of my events I have work on the body. On this retreat, this conference, April 8 and 9, we have a physiotherapist, he's not a physiotherapist. Yes, he is a physiotherapist. Physiotherapist that is coming to help us with how to manage and heal the nervous system as well. Toxic shame impacts our minds and our bodies. So, what does it look like in our bodies? It might show up in our posture. We might, people might carry themselves really well and still have toxic shame. right? So it's not just in the slouch posture and the slouch nervous system and all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes you might stand upright and dress nicely and still cover it, trying to cover toxic shame with an external look that looks polished, but underneath all the polish is the shame still. It sometimes show up in our care of self, how we look after ourselves, our lack of self-care, right? And sometimes we might do self-care on the external, but the soul care don't get done when we don't do the soul care. And we want to learn when we've experienced that, when our defining stories connected to that and influence toxic shame, which results in a belief system, we need soul care. We need to care for our souls in gentle and beautiful ways that can release the shame and heal us at a deep level. Toxic shame influence rejection of self in many different ways. How we neglect self, abandon self, don't believe in ourselves, don't listen to ourselves, and in so many other ways that it influences that rejection. It will tell us things about ourselves. So we will not believe we are lovable, or and nobody will love us. We'll not believe when people come into our lives and say, I love you. We won't believe that because we are so deeply rejecting of self. And that's why we need to do the soul care work, because when we can heal our heart, the wounded and bruised heart, we can learn how to release shame so that we can, we can, it's almost like polishing. And David talks about this in Psalms, where we be polished after the similitude of a palace. At the moment, toxic shame is like the dust on the palace, and we want to remove it so we can, the beauty that is inside of you can shine forth, and you can be a reflector of the image of God to this world, to yourself, and to those that are around you. And that is real freedom at deep left cellular levels. That's what, when I believe, when we read the verse that says, Beloved, I wish above all things that you will prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. I believe, God is so wise, he's so all-knowing. He gives us things that stretches through the ages of time, because he knows some of the things that we will encounter and the deep impact of it, and he wants your soul to prosper. Join us at the conference in Swansea as we start that work with you, or continue that work with you, or partner with you to do that work, so that you can have this, or begin the work of healing at this level. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join me on the next story.